Welcome, welcome, welcome to everybody out in the audience today to the fourth episode of the YASH Technologies Digital Trailblazers virtual webinar roundtable series. It's a mouthful every week, but I'm getting better at it every time I get an opportunity to say it. Again, welcome everybody to this fourth episode. Excited to bring another topic and another fresh perspective to the audience as we've made it through this five-part continuing episode virtual webinar. So fourth episode this week, fifth episode and final will be next week. Looking forward to everybody joining us for the final edition. Today we're going to tackle a more technical topic than we've broached in the first three sessions, and that's going to be over the Azure landing zone. And as I looked at Azure landing zone some months ago when Praveen and the YASH Technologies Microsoft service line team built out an internal training and enablement session for our sales team, I remember thinking, oh man, landing zone, this is going to be a dry topic, this is going to be really technical. And I'll admit, I wasn't the most excited person to go through the enablement session, but it didn't take me long to figure out just how well Praveen and the team were able to tell the message in a way that everybody understood it, everybody found the value in it, and we were all excited and charged up to be a little bit more of an expert on the Azure landing zone and the benefits that it affords. So with that being said, we're going to jump into it in a very similar way today with our panelists. We're going to jump in from the questions that they'll be asking to Praveen, and more importantly, open it up to that open dialogue that they'll be sharing of how the landing zone has benefited their specific companies and their departments within those companies, and allow you to take as much of that back to your teams as is humanly possible, and then look for those continued conversations with Praveen and the YASH team of how the Azure landing zone might be able to benefit your specific companies. So with that being said, as we've done in the past three episodes, I'd like to bring in each panelist, allow them to introduce themselves. For those of you that have been engaged with us now going into this fourth episode, you'll recognize a couple of the panelists from prior sessions, and we do have a couple of new faces to introduce you to. And I'll start things off in just a moment by introducing Tushar, and Tushar will jump in and give you some background on himself, and then we'll go through all of the panelists, let them do the introductions. And then today we're looking at 3 rounds of open dialogue between Praveen and the different panelists that are joining us. And then we'll have time to address questions that you may have from the live audience. And if you just go in and submit those questions right on the virtual meeting link, our panelists or our behind the scene team will be grabbing those and getting those sent to me, and we'll have time to address those about a quarter till the top of the hour, maybe 10 till the top of the hour. And then as we do every week, Praveen will describe how you can register to win some of the exciting prizes that he has made available to you as the live webinar participants. So with that being said, Tushar, I've kept you waiting there patiently long enough. Please introduce yourself to our audience today.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Tushar Shelar, Chief Information Officer for Murphy Company. We are basically a mechanical contractor and an engineering firm based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And we've been in existence since 1908. So we have seen some ups and downs, but definitely have not seen the unprecedented situation that we are in. But we've been in existence for over 100 years in St. Louis, Missouri. We also operate in Denver, Colorado, the overall Colorado market, right from Denver to Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. You know, pretty much, as I said, since being over 100 years in existence, pretty much any commercial facility in St. Louis, we have touched it, you know, right from hospitals to sports arenas. If any hockey fans out there, we had a part to play in the Blues Stadium, and we've also got a new project with the MLS team. So that's it from my end from Murphy Company.
And Tushar, it just goes to show that anybody can get along, because as a Chicago Blackhawks fan, if we're on the panel together, a St. Louis Blues fan and a Chicago Blackhawks fan, anybody can get along if Blues and Blackhawks fans can coexist.
That's true.
Mike, I see you, my friend, down there with that big smile on your face. Please introduce yourself to the audience today.
Hi guys, I'm Mike Brannan. I work at National Gypsum. We're a construction materials manufacturer headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'll be joining in to share a little bit about our Azure journey.
And for all of you out there in the audience today, Mike was talking with us as we were getting ready to go live, and he shared that he had what was probably going to be the last beautiful morning this morning that he was able to go for a walk. It was a nice 58-degree morning, not a lot of humidity and that stuff. So that smile you see on Mike's face is a direct result of him getting out there and enjoying the great outdoors this morning. So find him in another couple weeks and it'll be tremendously hot and humid, and you'll see the grumpy Mike Brannan. But we get the good one today.
Yep.
All right, Tony, please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Tony Wilkins. I'm with Future Infrastructure. I'm the Information Technology Director. Future Infrastructure is a utility construction company, so we put fiber in the ground, electricity, gas, do your intelligent traffic systems, and we span around from Atlanta to Nevada in the Southwest and growing. And glad to be here with all these fine gentlemen.
Tony, we're glad to have you today as well, and welcome to episode number 4, sir. Last but certainly not least is Alan. Alan has been with us through several of the episodes of the Digital Trailblazer series, so this is second nature to him. But Alan, for those new viewers that haven't had the opportunity to meet you before, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, hi guys. I'm Alan Millage. I'm with Kent Corporation, and we are headquarters in Muscatine, Iowa. At Kent, we process a whole heck of a lot of corn. So out of that, one of our primary products is alcohol. So whether it be bio-grade, commercial grade, or consumer grade alcohol. And real recently, something new that I get to share is that Kent was awarded a pretty prestigious honor of being one of the U.S. best managed companies by Deloitte and Deloitte and Pivotal, I believe. So it's a pretty prestigious honor. We just received that. And my duties are, yeah, awesome. My duties are, I manage the application development along with the administration services for IT. And last but not least, go Blues.
Yeah.
Oh man, now you're just piling on. You and Tushar are just piling on now. I see how this is going to get out of control really quickly. Well, last but certainly not least, and Praveen, you're taking way too much joy in Tushar and Alan getting the better of me in today's episode. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to bring in my colleague Praveen Kumar. Praveen is the driving force behind this Digital Trailblazers 5-part webinar series. And Praveen and his team have done just an incredible job of not only organizing the content for these sessions, but bringing these very profound panelists together and getting this thought leadership out to the virtual audience. Because as we all know, as the world has changed radically over the past few months, the way that we connect with one another has had to evolve just as quickly to make up for that. So huge thank you to Praveen for continuing to offer this thought leadership to the virtual world that we have out there, and keeping YASH Technologies at the top of the list when it comes to all things Microsoft services oriented. So Praveen, if you would please introduce yourself and give a little bit further background on what we're going to cover today with the Azure landing zone topic. Oh, Praveen, there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, John. As you all know already, my name is Praveen Kumar. I head the Microsoft practice for YASH Technologies. I've been working with YASH for over 11 years. I am based out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. For today's webinar, obviously this is on the Azure landing zone. So we are going to be talking about, what is really an Azure landing zone and why this Azure landing zone is important and why anybody should consider before, start things migrating over to the cloud. So what are those fundamentals that everybody should be aware? So those are the things that we are going to be discussing in today's webinar. But before I get started with the actual, the discussion itself, for the audience, those who are joining for the first time, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about who YASH is, and and what Microsoft services offerings to our customers and other folks out there. So YASH has been in the IT industry for almost 21, 22 years. We started our journey with John Deere in Moline, Illinois, and we have grew out of Moline, and then we expanded over to 6 continents now. So we work with pretty major Fortune 50 to Fortune 100 customers across the globe. So we are a 7,000 employee company and counting. And when it comes to specifically Microsoft, we are close to 650 to 700 employees. I mean, the consultants, it's all our own people. So we, again, work with many major customers across the US and across the world. Our primary focus within Microsoft it does go on 3 clouds. Obviously, Azure being one of them, Office 365, and now this is called as M365, and then Dynamics 365. So primary focus is on the cloud, but nevertheless, we also support and take care of our existing customers who have their legacy applications running on any other legacy .NET platforms, or BizTalk or other applications that is still going on. We take care of those applications as well. So in a short, so we do end-to-end operation support, starting from discovery assessment to application development, application modernization, and any specialty services, and then going over into the support model. So we cover the entire 360-degree support our entire suite of services to our customers.
Well, thank you very much, Praveen, and thanks for the background on the great things that you and your team are doing with YASH Technologies. Let's get into it. And obviously, I know that the audience is dying to hear about how YASH tackles the whole Azure landing zone philosophy and what our best practices are around that. As we were preparing for this, Tushar had a great way to kick this off, and against my better judgment, because you've been beating on me a little bit with your St. Louis Blues fandom, I'll go ahead, Tushar, and let you kick things off with your question. But like I said, I'm gonna keep my eye on you for the rest of this episode.
Sure, definitely.
All right, Tushar, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start off the discussion, but again, as most of us, the concept really of landing zone is kind of very foggy. It depends on whom you ask, what platform you're using, right? So if you're an AWS customer, the definition of landing zone may be different as versus Google, or So really, to at least set the discussion right, let me just ask Praveen, you, the expert, what is an Azure landing zone, and why is it important for a successful cloud infrastructure?
Absolutely, yeah. This is one of the fundamental or a basic question that as a thought leaders in the organization, we all should ask ourselves, and then also we need to question ourselves, why is it important? So in my experience, so when we started this cloud journey several years ago, maybe 5 years ago, or maybe 6 years ago, we all know that there is Azure, there is AWS, and then there is Office 365 and things like that. But if you all remember, when we talked about this cloud, the initial step into the cloud, we all started off with email. I mean, not a lot of people have actually started exploring AWS or Azure. That was not the case, at least in my experience. So many of the customers or organizations that I coordinated, they started with email, and then by default, Azure came along with it, right? So they had an Azure Active Directory, they had a little bit of Azure. So now, since you already have Office 365 and you already have Azure, so now let's start using, and let's start, lifting things or moving things from my on-prem and then move my workloads over to the cloud. This has been a norm. Okay, so I mean, we all could agree this, right? So this has been a norm, and then we have been migrating the workloads over to the cloud. And then lately we have started realizing, oh, sure, why am I getting so much of a subscription? Why is Microsoft is charging so much of dollars for this? And what is a better way, and what is an optimization way to manage all of these things? So that's how things started. And now this really, fundamentally goes into like, really what is a landing zone? So I think my definition of a landing zone is basically, I would say a landing zone is a configured environment with the standards of, secure cloud infrastructure. Maybe that will have some policies or some best practices and guidelines in a centralized managed services. And I would say this is the first step towards the cloud journey. First, we need to figure this out. And then once we have these processes and guidelines and best practices and the security, all of these things in place, then we start migrating things over to the cloud. But again, like I was saying, we did not start there. We started moving things onto the cloud. So I'll just take one example. So what really happened was there was one web application or one application that was running on-prem. We just want to get rid of all the hardware machine that is associated to it, whether it is just a web application or a database or all the network gear that is associated to it or all the storage that is associated to it. I just want to take all of these things and spin it on the cloud and then start utilizing it, right? So knowingly or unknowingly, what I have done is, so I just did a lift and shift. But there could have been a different opportunity for me to basically modernize this application. I didn't do that because I was not aware of these things. I just lifted it and shifted it over to the cloud, and then I started using some blob storages. I started using some SSD drives, and I didn't even set up some monitoring services. I didn't even set up the who's accountable for managing this, who's accountable for monitoring my services. What is the threshold limit on my server configurations? None of this has happened. I simply taken it, put it onto the cloud. Now I'm started understanding and realizing, oh, these are the things I should have taken care. So, I mean, does it all make sense to you, Tushar, whatever I'm kind of explaining?
Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree. It's like whenever this cloud thing came into existence, probably 7-8 years back, the first thing we all did was, hey, let's get our email up there, in the cloud. And we all thought, oh, that was a cloud migration. But without knowing there are so many other things that are, are tied to it. And then we are kind of now running into those issues about scalability and, just the overall compliance that goes with it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Mike, you had a really good follow-up question that takes that next step very naturally. What question did you have for Praveen?
Yeah, I'm interested in discussing how we can set up some roles and some policies so that we can provide an appropriate degree of control balanced with the kind of access that my users need to get jobs done in our Azure cloud. How can we set up those controls, but also enable people to get the things done that they need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this comes into what I was just explaining earlier related to your Azure landing zone. So as part of this, we also need to think about RBAC. So the Azure RBAC, so the role basis access levels. So once we have that kind of created in the Azure template or the ARM templates that we are going to be creating, so it would give an option for you to basically set up specific roles. So for example, you have something like.
I had to go to the office.
Oh, I was just going to remind you that you're
Sachin, can you mute everybody, please? Except me. Okay, so sorry about that. So as I was saying, right, so when you spin up all of these things together, so let's say you have a bunch of administrators who you wanted them to take care of specific functions within the cloud infrastructure. So let's say you have set up some virtual machines, and then you have also set up some network configurations are done, and then there is some backup policies that you have created, and then there are some storage that is going on, and then there are some bunch of databases that are there. You have created a DBA group to take care of the database and things like that. So now you don't want to put all of these things into one single group who can basically monitor and manage. So you can create specific groups and distribute them within the Azure resource pool that you are going to be creating. when you create, you specifically call out that here are my, DBA administrators, and here are my, virtual machine administrators, or here are my, network pool administrators and things like that. You can create them, and then you can assign the designated roles so that they would be only allowed to do certain backup jobs or network monitoring and things like that. So those are the things, that you would again take care of your RBAC policies when you set up, as part of your landing zone. So does it all making sense to you, Mike? I think you're on mute. Okay, cool.
We're doing a little bounce back and forth between mute, unmute, but yes, it does.
Okay, but let me basically, circle back with you on this, right? So, like, did you face any challenges specifically when it comes to the security or applying the policies on this different distribution groups and things like that? Did you had any challenges in that area, Mike?
We did. We started out much as you described with our email and our collaborative workload moving into the Microsoft cloud. So we needed to have some Active Directory connections, federated, set up Azure AD, and that was fine. Now we're at a mode where we've run and have begun to run apps in Azure, and we kind of woke up and figured out we need more of an architectural design. We can't just throw everything in like a dog pile into the cloud and expect things to work okay. And so as we started sorting that out and identifying different roles, that's where we hit this. I wish, because we're into this maybe 2.5 years now, I wish we'd have had this kind of guidance back when we first started, because I felt like we kind of stumbled around like it's like the den in the dark, and you're not sure where the footstool is in the room as you're trying to navigate. You know what I mean? You can stump your toe pretty easy, but fortunately, we haven't had anything horrible go wrong. It's just having that prescription ahead of time, I think, would have been very beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yep.
And Mike and Praveen, thank you very, very much for that. Tony, I know you sent me a note that you have a question you want to jump in here with, but a bit of a unique opportunity. One of the live audience members sent a follow-up question or something that fits very nicely into the topic that Mike and Praveen were just covering off on. And Praveen, I'd like to just take a quick second to pose this question because the flow is lined up very well. And it's along the lines of, if the landing zone is standardized, does that necessarily mean that my landing zone cannot have user-specific applications? What would be the smallest number of users to add to an application?
I mean, again, it depends, right? So there's no one set rule. So you could have multiple landing zones created in your environment. So not necessarily you should have only one landing zone and the landing zone should take care of everything. So that's not the fundamental recommendation that Microsoft is recommending. So, if you have a specific user set of a group that you wanted them to do a specific operations, so be it. You will create a landing zone and then you will make them part of that group, and then they would be allowed to perform only one set of operations. So that is specific to that ARM template that we are going to be creating. And then when we basically get into the next level, so it goes into scale and operation, and then we basically automate a bunch of things. So when we get into that level, when we are at a scale of automating all of the processes that are going to be there, so we can have multiple templates and multiple landing zones and multiple user groups pertaining into a different templates, and then things like that can be achieved there.
Thanks, Praveen. Thanks for your flexibility there. Appreciate it. Tony, I kept you waiting there and just a little bit longer than I intended. Please, I know you've got a great question for Praveen.
Yeah, it's just like fine wine, right? Just let it simmer.
That's right. Yep.
Appreciate that. So as Praveen, as we transition and we do hook into Active Directory and we move from our OU structure to the organizational unit to more groups and roles and responsibilities, do you have any guidelines for how we transition to organizational level accounts with roles and responsibilities in the cloud?
Yeah, I do. So I think what I would like to do here is I would actually like to show you a quick, or a quick guidelines that we normally recommend to our customers. I would like to show you that. So what I would like to do is I would like to share my screen. So let me know if you are able to see my screen. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so this is the subscription design, the best practices that typically recommended here. So you have a management group that consists of all of your business units, across your organization. So these business units are fundamentally are the key stakeholders, are the project sponsors within your organization. Let's say some funding unit, maybe finance or a marketing or service operations, they have some specific needs. They wanted to basically test it out and then see how this Azure environment, the cloud infrastructure, is going to help them accelerate their processes or maybe put more workloads and then get the better results out of that if they wanted to get onto this platform. So basically we would have a business unit created for them, and if they have a multiple geolocations, one in US, another one is in probably in South America, or maybe in Canada, or maybe in Europe. So we would basically configure those geolocations. And obviously, once you have this geolocation configuration is going on, so you also need to think and consider about the environment. So whether you want to consider a prod or a non-prod, and then when considering these prod and non-prod, so you would also want to keep into in your design that how many of these applications are actually mission critical, meaning some of these my applications or the workloads that I'm bringing over to the cloud absolutely cannot go down, and they need to be available 99.999% as a uptime. So and for that, what sort of an infrastructure and what sort of a configuration do I need? And then some of them are basically some protected data. So absolutely this data cannot be shared with any other applications or services. But in other applications that you see, I can go away with a shared SQL server or SQL applications or any other shared services that I wanted to do. So maybe I would want to consider. And then once those things have been created, so I would basically set up the subscription model for that. And then I would also create the resource groups, and underneath the resource groups, I'll start assigning and allocating, the applications and, the application owners and things like that. And when I do these kind of, hierarchical structure in my, in my design, the way that I would actually also consider is I not only enable the monitoring, but I also enable the threshold. So what I mean by these two things is I constantly want to monitor these applications and then start reporting that things back to me. But also, let's say some of the thresholds that I set. So let's say there is a bandwidth that is very important to me when it comes to the mission critical applications, or some thresholds are related to the data consumption in return that is kind of a indirect, it is associated with your subscription cost itself. If things like that, maybe you wanted to set a threshold for $2,000 in a month, or maybe $5,000 in a month. So once it starts reaching that threshold, maybe 80% or 70%, it'll start alerting you, it'll start notifying you, and then it'll make you take some critical decisions and at that point in time. So basically, when I kind of go into this model, so these are the type of subscription things that I would put them into consideration, and I'll also take things into my design of the roles and responsibilities, who can do what, and and what resource groups are responsible for notifying, and once the notification is come, so how I can readjust my throttling and things like that, I can take care of in my design. So does that make sense to you, Tony?
Yeah, very good. It's well laid out. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Praveen, thank you very much also for the graphical the graphical touch base there as well. It helped bring it all home for the audience. It helped me out a lot as well. Alan, your question is more for the group as a whole you had shared with me, and more of a roundtable insights that you're looking for. I'd like to start with Praveen and give him the first opportunity to address it. But all of you on the panel, as Alan goes into this question, looking for any perspectives or any best practices that any of you can share to round out this whole topic on this, Alan. So please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, we've talked, and this kind of wraps a lot of I would assume from a strategy perspective, but we talk quite a bit about different functions, about what is Azure, the landing zone, and sorts. But if I need to get over the hump, and I'm not there yet as far as implementing a landing zone, I guess because of ease of mind, what are some of the considerations or the key considerations I should keep in mind while implementing from an implementation perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, to answer this question, I thought I would share my screen and then give a better perspective of, what are the key components of the Azure landing zone, so that way everybody get the, the complete perspective of what I'm trying to explain here. So can you make me a presenter again, Sachin? Okay, are you seeing my screen again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Very good. Okay. So basically, if you can see my screen, so these are the key components and the considerations for your landing zone. So in my previous slide, in my previous explanation, so I talked about, these are the founding stones of laying your cloud modernization or a migration strategy. You need to have one landing zone. But again, what is a we talked about a landing zone, but what goes in the landing zone is basically these are the things that goes into the landing zone. So when you look at the core services, so obviously you will have a compute, network, and storage. And then the other things that also goes into the consideration is, how secure do I want to make this, the entire infrastructure, and how my users can connect to this environment, and how am I going to be managing. So these are the 4 or 6 fundamental things that you need to take into the consideration. But then if you really look at the other things that are associated to it are, obviously my identity and my access, so the cost management is also very, very critical and important to me. And then to accelerate and to automate the overall process, so can I bring my DevOps into the equation? Can I create some ARM templates and then start automating the overall process? So while this is going on, so how do I monitor my overall infrastructure, and then and then start sending some alerts and things like that? So while all of these things are going into the consideration, you also need to keep into mind on your design perspective about the naming standard. So there are certain things that are reserved. You cannot use, when you are creating some virtual machines or some VNet or some backup storage and things like that, when you are creating within the Azure as a resource groups or resource utilization. So certain things are reserved. And then the Microsoft is also providing some guidelines on how you have to create your resource within the Azure. So, this is the, at the high level, these are the considerations that you keep in your design, so that you can basically optimize the design in the later stage. So does it all making sense to you, Alan, based on what I'm explaining and what I'm showing here?
Sure. It makes sense. It's just at a high level, there's some components there that are pretty rudimentary, or pretty important, if you will, I should say, to the overall infrastructure as a whole. Yeah. And I guess that what is important is that we just don't lose focus on that. We certainly have to keep that in consideration. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So
if I may, I can just add quickly on that subject too. It also depends on your industry, but if you're in a heavily regulated industry, then I think you should get the right folks, upfront in your design discussion. So I worked for a pharmaceutical for almost 14 years, and then I moved into construction. So construction is a complete cowboy country. as versus pharmaceutical. So it all depends on the compliance and really the regulatory framework that you work in. Like if you are under compliance for GDPR, then that's definitely some consideration that you'll have to give, especially if you're doing businesses in Europe or something like that. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, do you have anything to share when it comes to the considerations when you're designing the landing page? I know you are also trying to do this. So, we talked earlier, we wanted to get into the workshop or, the overall briefing session. We wanted to do this, but because of this pandemic situation, everything kind of, put into a different stage right now. So, but what's your thought process on this, or what's your point of view on this landing zone, and what are the things that are the key considerations for you when we are thinking of designing a landing zone?
As our move into Azure became more serious beyond some basic authentication and some services that we needed to run our Microsoft cloud at all, we had to kind of take our team through some knowledge gain that really wasn't there before. When you're building on-premise hardware, and even if you're virtualized in something like VMware, that's a whole different world than this new Azure world of infrastructure as code. So one thing we're still getting used to, and one of my questions for you to elaborate on that fits right in here is, how do we make sure that we're doing a good job of monitoring for resource consumption, and how do we manage our costs so that we don't have that great big surprise of an overrun where someone kind of let the whole herd out of the pasture, and now you're having to explain a big unexpected bill. At the same time, I mean, you want to make progress, and you want to get people enabled to get things done. So it's a balancing act, and it's also a relearning on the part of most of my team. We're coming down that road, still need some help, and still looking for some guidance. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'll share my point of view, or how we can take care of these things. Basically, when you look at the the cost monitoring and things like that, right? So that's very important. So our primary goal is basically, I wanted to get rid of my existing infrastructure, existing workloads, move it over to the cloud. That's all good. But once you start moving things over to the cloud, whatever the backup that it is producing, or whatever the writes that it is doing on the infrastructure, you started realizing that, oh, this is very high, and then obviously you will get a big bill, which you don't want. So there are certain things that comes into the equation when it comes to the monitoring. So there are a bunch of things that you could do. So Microsoft has got basically 4 different things that are going on when it comes to Azure monitoring. So they have an Azure monitoring service, and then they also have log analytics. So they provide all the log analytics of what's going on within the system, within the infrastructure, and things like that. They also have Azure Insights, and then they also have alerts. So each one of them have a different functionality within the Azure environment. But I have seen some customers using some third-party products such as SolarWinds, and then there are other products out there as well. So basically, with this Azure monitoring service, you can not only monitor your network traffic, your server uptime and downtime, and then your server traffic that is coming in and going out, and then you can also basically have all the read IO operations that are going on within your server. So all of those things basically you can monitor. But when it comes to the cost or the subscription piece that you wanted to monitor, so again, based on the hierarchical structure that we have defined earlier, so we define those hierarchical structure, and then we also make some business units are responsible for this group that we are creating, and within that group we will only give a specific things. So for example, if that group is is only interested in VMs and some sort of a storage or some sort of a PaaS services. So we will only assign those things within that group, and then other things such as some expensive devices like some IoT hub or some analytics and things like that, they are kind of goes very expensive over the period of time. So I have seen some people the subscription shoot up from 1 month to another month, like $20,000 and $30,000, and again, not a complete or a better monitoring of their environment. So things like that, we put them into some groups, and then we constantly monitor. And like I said, we also need to put some thresholds. So once it reaches to that level, so it starts notifying you, and then kind of make you some decisions that, hey, should we consume this, or should we basically monitor and then look at the log analytics and then see why so much of a load that is coming in via your network or maybe your IO operation. So what is it causing the most expensive thing? So you can look at it, and then based on that you can make some actions, and then these actions becomes you can reapply these actions into the next template that you're going to be deploying. So things like that over the period of time will kind of evolve into the better game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Make sense on what I'm explaining, Mike?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Cool.
Praveen, thank you very much for answering that additional question there. Before we get into the final round of questions, and based on where we're at with time, we'll be able to fit in one more round. On your previous visual that you had shared, I saw there was a little segment on security, and we have one of our live webinar participants or live webinar guests that had asked a question around security. So before we migrate into the next topic, just want to get that out there so we make sure we have time to address it. And it's, while data stored in the cloud is likely more secure than on-premise, most companies have an aversion to cloud storage. How do you address this?
Yeah, that's a general perception, right? So we all think that whatever the information that is stored across the four walls is more secure than openly storing over to the cloud. So that's our perception. But I think Microsoft has done a tremendous job on securing their data, and then whatever that goes. And obviously you have a within your network, when you start creating your Azure environment, so you must have created some VNet, and then you must have created some tunneling from your corporate Active Directory or your corporate environment to cloud. So whatever that tunneling that is going on, that is more secure. And then on top of it, we can beef it up all the 128 or even 256 hashing that goes on top of the socket communication that happens from your basic data center to the cloud. But when it comes to the specific thing that he's asking about, how secure this is, obviously there are multiple ways that we could do. So one is basically, all the information that is coming in, going out, so we can basically monitor that entire traffic, number one. Number two, so we can also have, some multi-factor authentication. So whoever is not part of your Active Directory absolutely cannot get in. And then if your external vendors or contractors or suppliers, they want any specific access, right? So you can enable a B2B or a B2C type of a integration within your Active Directory. And then once they are authenticated, only then you will let them in, and then you will let them access some specific resources within your group. And again, there are multiple permutations and combinations that you can do to achieve your goal. But again, it depends on what specific thing or what specific access that you wanted to give into any of the Azure resources.
Praveen, thanks for your flexibility there. I wanted to make sure. I know that's something that's a burning question on a lot of people's minds, and it was a perfect opportunity to get it in there. So again, thank you for your thought leadership around security. Tushar, you had sent me a chat while we were going through that last topic, and you had mentioned that you'd heard Alan and Mike talk about their varying stages of adoption around landing zone, and specifically your next question that you had is perfect to take that to the next level and address really how to adopt the landing zone. So please go ahead and give your question to Praveen.
Yeah, exactly. So far, great discussion. But if somebody's out there who just is starting off, it's hard to believe that nobody has is there a company still out there who doesn't have any footprint on cloud, but just assume in a fictitious world for some reason there's no some that we want to start off. What would you recommend, Praveen? Would you suggest starting with an enterprise scale landing zone, or should we start small and then scale up? What's your strategy there?
Yeah. So again, to answer your question, so I'm sharing my screen again. So what we call it as this CAF. It's a cloud adoption framework. So there are different decision points and different factors need to consider here. So obviously there are 4 different things that I'm talking about and I'm showing here. So there is like the cloud experience, or you're just a beginner, or you just wanted to move your workloads to the cloud and then see how they are scaling and how they are operating. So this is something basically a migrate is kind of a landing zone that you would recommend. Start slow and then kind of start small and then kind of a scale big type of an approach. So in this specific thing, again, we cannot just stand up the landing zone and then start utilizing it in a day one onwards. So that's not how things work in the Azure cloud infrastructure. So basically, we can look at your existing IT landscape and then kind of do a discovery on that. And typically, we take a discovery of 1 to 3 weeks and kind of suggest you after that what sort of a landing zone would you require if you have less than 1,000 assets, including your complete network gear, your VMs, and then your applications, and then your backup and your storage and all that. So if it is less than 1,000 assets, so basically we can do the discovery in less than 3 weeks or so, and then kind of tell you that how you can actually set up a landing zone. And then based on this approach, all of these applications or all of these workloads and instances that you have, can this be production ready? Probably not. So you would have a limited scope. And then this approach would definitely give you a hybrid approach. So some of since you are getting started, so you can still have some of your infrastructure and your gear running at your physical data center, and then some of the applications and workloads can still be running on cloud. So we would have that hybrid type of an approach. And again, so we also consider the sensitive data, mission critical, and then compliance. So those things we would do it at the small scale level. If you are just getting started, so new to the cloud, so we basically go with this CAF migrate approach. And then sorry, Tushar, you had a question?
No, I've been just acknowledging. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then the CAF foundation is basically moderate to experience, and again, this is less than 1,000 assets. So this is basically once you get that initial kind of a foot in the ground. So now you are familiarized, and then this kind of gives you an opportunity to automate some of the things and configure some of things. And then from there, so basically we go over into the enterprise scale, and then finally, we can debate from the enterprise scale, we can go into a CAF Terraform, so we can have various templates, and then basically we can spin up and kind of move things pretty easily, pretty quickly. That includes both multiple of your environments. Like some cases I have seen pretty large instances using the SAP and JDE or Oracle instances standing up on the Azure cloud using the Terraform. We can spin up those environments, including your dev/test/production. So all of those things we can basically do whole bunch of things. And again, we would basically start from small, and then we'll go over the period of time, and we'll grow. And once we have understanding, we'll get into that enterprise scale. So typically, that's been an approach. When you are dealing with the landing zones, and how do we basically take a full advantage of the cloud resources and cloud workloads and things like that. That's the typical recommendation, and this is something out there on the Microsoft general guidelines as well.
All right. Yeah.
Praveen, thank you very, very much. And panelists, I'm going to take a bit of a liberty here based on when Praveen was in the midst of that of that answer, we received a couple of really pointed questions from the audience, and they're specifically to the entire panel. So whatever Praveen was, the good thought leadership he was providing there sparked a lot of additional insights from the audience. And with the time we have left, I want to make sure that we get to these last 2 points again, because they're pointed to the entire panel. So what I would like to do is start the question. Praveen, have you give your take, and then anybody else on the panel that has additional insights or thought leadership around that, feel free to jump in from your perspective. And the first one is, what are the best practices to set up a management hierarchy to consistently apply access control policies and compliance to groups of resources and use tagging to track related resources? So Praveen, I'll have you start and then open it up to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, so this tagging is a very important feature that goes into you're setting up your Azure landing zone. So I think in my previous explanation that I was giving to everybody, that you have a specific Azure subscription design that goes from the business units and geography and things like that. So one other topic that I also wanted to cover in the tagging or in that same design principles is that there are some naming conventions that we also need to take into the consideration. So all of these naming conventions, like let's say if I am using a resource group, it has to start with RG. If I am creating any virtual networks, I'll start with VNet. So things like that. So some conventions have to be taken. So here is where I take the tagging opportunity to basically tag that specific thing into that resource group. So let's say I created a virtual network. So I start with the VNet, and anything that is associated or underneath that resource group, I'll tag all of that underneath that resource group so that it is easy for me to manage and then kind of maintain in that way. So that's my thought process. So any ideas or anything that you guys want to share, Mike and Alan, Tony, Tushar?
I mean, what I would share is to your point is look at what you have today in your existing AD and translate that, but you map that out beforehand and with naming conventions and everything, so that you sort of have a better plan versus just lifting and shifting and then while it's there trying to figure it out. So you move things into their respective containers and their respective groups, and the policies are there in place. So that's what I would add on to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Tony.
Yeah, Tony, I want to add on just a tad bit here, more from, I think it's also security. When you start talking security, you're also talking, the nightmare that security can bring in the management of such. And so I think the auditing piece of it, the cleanup and all, it needs to be in consideration as well. So I definitely like the whole concept of mapping things out, drawing things. But I think there also has to be something that needs to be taken in consideration is some sort of audit or maintenance policy, if you will, to make sure that security doesn't get too much of a management nightmare, because that's very easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Yeah, just adding to that, it doesn't matter on-prem or you're going on cloud, means the compliance guys are going to be there, you're going to get audited, so you're going to be under SOX compliance, and so, that's not going away anywhere. So just be mindful about that regulatory things are going to continue regardless where you are, and so you need to factor those things in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Our building materials industry isn't subject to a lot of compliance, but we're all about making sure we do things securely. And one resource I would offer up to the audience that we took advantage of, there's a little group that does a bunch of benchmarking. There's the Center for Internet Security has got some Azure benchmarks. They've got benchmarks for almost everything. We use them for client computing and some other items. Those benchmarks can be a great reference when you are doing your sorting and then trying to assign it to something that other people like an auditor or other team members and partners that you need to get engaged It's kind of nice to get people hooked into some sort of framework that we can all use as a common base, a common language.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
Everybody on the panel and Praveen, thank you for taking a moment. And I know we went off track a little bit there, but I knew that would spark some open dialogue between the group. I have time for one more of the audience questions, and it was intended for the panel, but we're running really short on time. So Praveen, I'm going to direct it right at you. And if you could give an answer in the next minute or two, and then go right into the closing of today's episode and explain how to register for the prizes, I'd appreciate it. And the question is this: what services does Azure offer to monitor the performance of resources?
Yeah, so the performance of the resources. Yeah, right. So when it comes to the performance of the resources, so it might be related to your virtual machines, or it might be related to your network, or it might be related to your storage. So basically, there is a Azure monitoring services that is available, which is free of cost as part of your Azure subscription. You can use that, and then it'll start basically monitoring all of that, and then kind of give you some performance reports. How is the uptime going on, and how is the network traffic going on. So it'll start giving you all of the details. But some people have I have seen, at least in my experience, that they use some third-party tools such as SolarWinds, and then there are some other tools that are out there. So they use those tools to basically monitor the complete infrastructure. But I think in my recommendation, so let's start small, and then if it is not good enough, so explore additional products. But why do you want to start with SolarWinds or other products in the day one? I think Azure monitoring does a pretty good job, not only monitoring the services, but also showing the performance levels of each and every workloads that are going on in the Azure environment. I hope I'm able to answer that question. But again, like whoever asked that question, if you need any follow-up details on it, so definitely I can provide more details on it.
Yeah, and with that, Praveen, I know we were running short on time, so thanks for squeezing what you could in there. For anybody that's wanting to reach out to you to continue this conversation, we have some further questions that have come in as you were wrapping up there. I know the team will get those to you, but for anybody that has follow-up questions that they'd like to ask, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and your team, Praveen?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have any, again, I'm sharing my screen. John, you're able to see it, okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So yeah, if you guys have any questions that you wanted to answer, get an answers from us. So here is the email, so TrailBlazer at yash.com. So please feel free to reach us at this email ID. So within less than 24 hours, we should be able to provide you the responses to you back. A couple other things I also wanted to summarize before we close for today. So any feedback or any updates that you wanted to provide us about our webinars, today's webinar. So after this GoToWebinar, you close it after the session is done. So it'll take you to the URL. So we would really appreciate if you could provide feedback about this webinar. That will be helpful to us. One other thing I also wanted to let you guys know that we are giving away a lot of gift cards ranging from $10 to anywhere between $10 to $100. So you might be a lucky winner. So please check your luck, spin the wheel, and here is the URL for you to spin this wheel. So the URL is up and running right now. So please go there and take an advantage. Again, that URL is yash.com/spinwheel. It's all just one word. It's available. So go check and then take an advantage of winning a gift card. One more thing. So we are doing a mega raffle on the next session. So we are giving a lot of giveaways. The 4K webcam and 34-inch monitor, the microphone and Bose headphones and speakers and things like that. So please make sure you register for next webinar and attend that webinar as well. And then in the next week webinar, so all of these things might be yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Praveen. And what is the topic for the final? There you go. What is the topic for the final webinar?
So the final webinar, we are calling it as a legacy to latest. So a lot of the people, I mean, now that you have seen the Azure landing zone, so what's the next step? So now I set up the landing zone. Obviously, the next step is to, migrate my workloads from on-prem to cloud. So, how do we do that? And what sort of accelerators does YASH have? And how we help our customers? So those are the things that we are going to be discussing in next webinar, which is a very, very interesting webinar that we have put together, and we have got a lot of cool demos to show in that webinar as well.
Well, Praveen, thank you again, and thanks to all of our panelists, and we'll see you next week for our final episode in the 5-part series. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.
Thank you, guys.